Yeah, shall we start slowly? And I guess people can jump in um, while we're hosting the session.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye on the thingy, and you keep an eye on the whiteboard, and James, I'll keep an eye on the microphone, so to speak. Warm welcome, everyone. My name is Simon Önnered. I hate saying that in English because it's such a Swedish name. Uh, but welcome to the Systems Innovation Energy Hub. This is our third event since our launch session, I think. Um, and our hub is, I don't even know how to describe it, but we try to put our money where our mouth is, and actually do the things that we talk about doing, and facilitating and helping things see things from the bigger picture, and maybe applying some longer time frames into planning processes, which might be a little bit too traditional sometimes, and just dealing with the uncertainty of those long time frames. Um, in my daily work, I am pursuing my PhD actually, which is on a very similar topic as to what we're doing here. It's on systems thinking and foresight, and combining that to kind of explore the alternatives of what we're trying to achieve with our energy transition, and trying to do that in a just and equitable manner, which doesn't compromise too much on our values and ambitions as a society, and seeing the energy as a means rather than an ends. I would now actually introduce my colleague and partner Ivana, but she's running a little bit late, so she'll join us in a minute or so whenever she appears. So I'll hand it over to you instead, Anya.
Yes, so hello everyone. I'll briefly introduce myself. I'm a community developer here on the SI Network platform. And yes, I'm happy to kind of facilitate on this Miro board today. So I'll let James introduce yourself, who's our guest speaker.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you both. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today. So I'm James, and I work for a onshore wind developer in Wales. We're called Bute Energy, and I'm part of the community benefits team as a social mapping and monetary evaluation learning lead. And it's such a unique role in that I get to apply a lot of the tools which is shared and disseminated around the Systems Innovation Hub. So to be here today and share some of the application of those tools and some of those approaches and some of that excellent learning is really awesome. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, James. And we'll dive into your presentation very soon. But first, we'll let you facilitate a mini introduction, and then we'll go to an icebreaker on the Miro board. And then we'll go into James's case study with community-led approaches for renewable energy. So very looking forward to diving into that. I'll let you, James, facilitate the first part.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. So it's just a fun little icebreaker here, and as you can see, there's a painting in front of you. Now, when I've done this exercise before, it seems to elicit a lot of different opinions, emotions, receptions. I think usually it's interesting to ask people what they think the name of this might be, or what would they put a name to. How does it make them feel? And if they indeed recognize this painting, they know the name of it because they've got a particular eye for artwork. Maybe just keep it to yourself for now. But maybe, yeah, where'd be the best place for people to share names and ideas and emotions, Anya? Would it be in the chat or on the Miro board?
Yeah, in the chat, just jot down. Yes, what do you see?
I got ahead of myself.
You name this. How does this piece of work make you feel, or do you even recognize this painting? Perfect. just jot down something in the chat, even if it's wrong, no worries.
Oh,
Oh,
David.
I'm impressed by all
Oh,
of
some cool stuff coming through. Yeah, wow.
Never underestimate the crowd. This is amazing. Okay.
Cool, cool. So some interesting responses in here. One of you is absolutely correct. But who is that person? Shall we unveil the painting? It absolutely spot on. It is a section of the Mona Lisa just there on her left shoulder. Um, it's an interesting exercise because a lot of people see this image and think it's foreboding, it's ominous, other words of a similar nature. But when you expand that view, that lens, you're like, oh, it's a much celebrated piece of artwork, familiar to quite a number of people in the world and through history, and brings a lot of joy to people. People celebrate it, come to visit it, and those feelings of ominous and dread, well, typically disappear for some people. Oh, there's an Italian in the room, so they have a particular eye for the for Da Vinci's work. But well done, Joe, for identifying that almost immediately. Uh, so that's just a nice little exercise. There's a nice little analogy of when you take that broader lens, see the bigger picture, how those initial assumptions can change. Yeah, so thanks Anya for letting me lead on that icebreaker.
Yeah, that was a great icebreaker, and great to expand a bit of our worldview. And before we dive in again to the presentation, we'll just get you warmed up on the mirror board. So we would love to just quickly hear from you and see what sector you're really coming from, and also where are you currently zooming in from. So to get us all started and to get everyone a bit familiar who's in the room, you can just grab a sticker note, a dot here towards your industry, and then place it in the geographical location you're currently based in. So,
Oh, and if you're from Iceland, I'm very sorry. For some reason, this map excluded Iceland.
yes, we need to add Iceland here. So, in the chat, I sent the Mirrorboard link, and then you'll be able to go into Mirrorboard and then use one of these dots and place it where you're currently zooming in from. Oh. And I'll just give us a bit of that. And also, if you can't access the mirror board, you can also write in the chat. So that's also fine if you want to open it. And great. So it's always interesting just to see a bit of the diversity here in the room. Yeah, also very interesting for you as well, maybe to get connected to other people in the community and in the space. And hopefully we'll get to know each other a bit better. For our second exercise, to kind of lead us into the presentation of today, we would love to hear from you in a local context. What does community mean to you? You can either write in a sticker, or you can also write in the chat. And what do you look for in a community? So I'll just give us 1 minute just to write that down.
Wonderful. And for people who are just joining us, there's a mirror link in the chat where you can follow along with the presentation. It's somewhat interactive here before James will kick off a more non-traditional presentation.
So I'll just read through some of them. So the question is, in a local context, what do you look for in a community, and what does community mean to you? So connections, identity, social milieu, interesting angles on systems innovation, look for support, cohesion, friendship, opportunities for collaboration, arts and culture, sharing, responsibility, and in the chat.
I'll for anyone looking for the right section in the mirror board, if you can press on the little icons in the top right of people, and you can get to where they are by just press it on the. Can you show with your mouse, Anya, the?
Yeah, we are here. And I'll read the last one. Common goal, yet diverse interests. Thank you, everyone. I think those are really interesting points as well. And hopefully this was a good introduction to our section coming up. I'll let James take the stage and share some interesting case study with us. So hand it over to you, James.
Oh, that's appreciated, Anya, and thank you for leading that that exercise just now to gather people's perceptions of community, and it's really encouraging to see some of the answers there. And like my interest with my work is that sort of inherent relationship between people and place and the infrastructure, which is addressing some of the most existential challenges of our times required, and how people are an integral part of that. They can't just disappear. Community especially is such an important facet of this net zero challenge and how we get there. So just to set some of the context on how I'm using some of the tools and understanding community and that relationship of people, place, and renewable infrastructure, I'll just talk about the organization I work for, of course, who are enabling some of this work and enabling some of the possibilities for positive change. So I work for Bute Energy. We're an independent renewable energy company, mainly focused on onshore wind in Wales. So we're based in Wales, focused on Wales, and we're established around 5 years ago, and are seeking to develop an onshore wind portfolio of around 2 gigawatts in Wales by 2030. So that's a very ambitious portfolio in a very ambitious time. But Wales does have a net zero, 100% renewable target by 2035. So we're hoping to exceed that target and support the Welsh government's target for all electricity to be 100% renewable by 2035. So yeah, we hoped, our ambition is to deliver a meaningful contribution to the Welsh government's renewable energy targets and provide investment and jobs to the communities in and around our projects, and look at the many facets of communities and places we can support and enable through our proposed infrastructure. So before I dive into our projects and my work with communities, just a little bit about Wales. And I think the first thing anyone would want to say about Wales is that it's not in England. It's a country just to the west of England. It's, albeit small, it has a population of around 3 million people. Has its own language. The Welsh language is prevalent, and this leads to a very vibrant culture. You know, the South Wales valleys is very much different to the more rural middle section of Wales, and again very different to the northern section. sometimes you only have to go to the next valley town along to notice the vibrancy in culture and the way people engage and interact. It's a very small but vibrant country, rich in its language, its heritage, and its identity. In regards to the energy sector, we have a devolved Welsh government here, and energy is a devolved issue. So we have our own planning process, which is called the DNS process, which is Development of National Significance. And we have some really unique policy enshrined in Wales, which can inform the planning process and how we begin to navigate challenges around net zero and communities' place in that. And that's specifically around the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. So this was a policy enshrined in 2016, and its aim is to improve the social, economic, environmental, and cultural well-being of Wales. And this key piece of legislation gives Wales, well, it addresses a number of challenges that Wales faces now and in the future, such as the climate change, poverty, health inequalities, and lack of job opportunities and economic and growth. But I think the most important thing about this, the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, it recognizes the interdependencies of all these challenges. Yes, we need to look at net zero. Yes, we need to look at the climate crisis. But what does this mean in relation to the social, the economic, biodiversity, and the culture as well? You know, we can't think about doing net zero without thinking about green spaces, people's health and access to recreation. You can't think about it without the Welsh language and that Welsh heritage and identity disappearing. So these are all interconnected, all important. So the Act includes Sustainable Development Principle, and that requires public bodies to take into account the impact their decisions could have on people living in Wales in the future and not just the current time. But we're a private organisation, but we do consider the same principles in our work. So just a few more points to this slide, specifically by the numbers. So we're proposing 2.1 gigawatts of clean green energy generated by our onshore wind projects. Hopefully this could offset 2.6 million tons of carbon dioxide. This would be equivalent 7% of Wales' total greenhouse gas emissions. And our projects would be the equivalent power of 2,260,000 homes. I think that figure is. And again, 2030, we're hoping for our projects to be fully operational. Next slide, please, Anya. Yeah, so investing in Welsh communities. So we believe Welsh communities stand to gain much more than just the broad advantages of large-scale onshore wind development. And those broad advantages do include decarbonisation, energy security, and cost of living reduction. But rather, there is also an opportunity for developers like ourselves to make a genuine commitment to be responsible and impactful with our projects through a community benefit fund. And that's my position in your organisation. How do we spend this community benefit fund wisely and not miss a golden opportunity? So the Bute Energy Community Benefit Fund is not about giving back, but also about engaging positively with local communities, businesses, and organizations in a bottom-up way, addressing their unique needs and leaving a lasting legacy. So my colleagues and I in the community benefits team are engaging with communities now. We're listening to their challenges, what's specific to their local community, how these challenges are related to one another. Say, for example, in rural Wales, young people leaving the area, that might have an impact upon culture. It might have an impact upon the aging population who require young people in the area to work in health and social care jobs. It might have an impact upon arts and culture, where young people who bring vibrant ideas, disruptive ideas around art aren't supporting that local art scene. And art stagnates. So we need to look at those challenges in relation, but we're also trying to investigate who's addressing one of those challenges or more. So creating jobs in the area, but also looking at those art scenes and maybe local music venues, or ensuring that young people have access to green space. Who's addressing multiple challenges? So if our entire plan portfolio is developed, our community benefit fund would invest up to £800 million over 40 years in the community's local energy parks. So that's a big number, £800 million to spend. And my job is to ensure we spend that wisely on those on those community issues that are maybe more structural, those structural vulnerabilities. Of course, households live in close proximity to our proposed energy parks. But we really want to think widely. We want to think ambitiously. And how can we get to some of those root issues? We prioritise keeping this investment within Wales, ensuring a lasting legacy for future generations, and committed to those communities close to our energy parks. So just very quickly, I'll touch upon some of the themes we're kind of using as our North Star. That's social mobility, creating work opportunities and engaging with the youth. That's education, providing renewable energy education to local institutions. Recreation and health, enhancing access to recreational and health activities. Environment and culture, promoting local Welsh culture, heritage, and environmental projects. And cost of living, collaborating to address the cost of living crises with a focus on energy efficiency. So these are things we can do now because the cost of living is a very prominent issue in Wales and the UK at large, where people are living in fuel poverty. 1 in 3 households, in fact, recently recorded. People are experiencing hygiene poverty, food, people accessing food banks. So with cost of living, we're looking at how we can support those immediate challenges now, but also how we can enable small scale renewable projects in local communities, hydro, solar, wind, and create cooperative models, because we've got the inside knowledge within our team to maybe begin to catalyze some of these small scale renewable projects and hopefully enable them through our community benefit fund. So each one of these themes has a designated lead, I should say, who work closely with the community. So they're going out and meeting with people now, holding those conversations, trying to find those often ignored or vulnerable voices as well. So ensuring that they're not left out. So the loudest voices doesn't control the room, but also hear about the challenges from those maybe vulnerable voices as well. So they're spending a good few years, 2-3 years, meeting with these people, heading all over Wales, all over the country to our sites, and just trying to embed themselves in the community as much as they can. So if I could go to the next slide, Anya, that would touch upon some of my specific work, which is processing this data. So we have a lot of money to spend from onshore wind projects, hopefully. And we want to spend it wisely. So that's the challenge. We're going out, we're meeting the organizations now, we're hearing about those place-based challenges, but that's a lot of data to process. So I've begun to engage a lot with the Systems Innovation Network to look to some of the answers for these challenges and harnessing some of these systems-based approaches. Some of the ideas of complexity theory, network theory, emergence theory, all those great resources in the Systems Innovation Network, and how I can begin to apply this to some of the challenges we're facing in Bute Energy and in Wales. And when the community benefit fund goes live, we are supporting those best intervention points, those points of leverage in the system that could have a cascade of benefit. Again, that useful illustration example of young people leaving the area and the vicious cycles that could occur from young people leaving the area. How can we turn that into a virtuous cycle? Well, we need to find those organizations. So we need to be thorough and understand the relationships and the interdependencies between actors and challenges. So this is where Kumu steps in, informed by the interdependency mappings approaches, the systems mapping approaches, some of these excellent learnings found on the Systems Innovation Network, and some of those great authors we've come to know and love, like Donella Meadows, etc. But uniquely through this Bute Energy lens and addressing some of the key challenges we're trying to apply it to. So yeah, of course, we address the climate crisis as a complex undertaking, and its impacts are felt differently by each community. Again, Wales is very vibrant, so we need to apply this mapping approach not to Wales as a whole, but to each of the communities we're engaging with. And typically this is done in a regional way. So regions in Wales can range from 100,000 people in Powys, which is a huge county, slap bang in the middle of Wales, to a collection of communities and small towns and villages in the South Wales Valley. But we do this mapping approach for each of our communities of interest. And we recognize the complexity of the climate crisis as closely intertwined with the place-based challenges specific to local Welsh communities. So we, as a team, a community benefits team, believe we should adopt a data-driven approach and adopt a holistic whole systems perspective to this challenge of community benefits disbursement. And we do this via a combination of qualitative and quantitative data. Quantitative data, we use census data. The last census data set in the UK was from 2021. But the qualitative data is gathered from those thematic leads and from useful local reports and wellbeing plans coming out of the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, specific to regional communities. And we visualize all this qualitative data on a map like we're seeing before us, and begin to analyze the interdependencies between these challenges. And this can help us to validate community concerns, mobilize stakeholders to create value networks, and generate innovative solutions and identify those points of leverage in the system. And why is this important? Well, I think it's important because it allows us to be empathetic in the way we engage with communities. Because as we did in that exercise at the start of the session, everyone has different interpretation of their community. And some of these interpretations are shared amongst the community, and then there's individualistic opinions. But we need to be empathetic to each community's challenges, aspirations, and goals. And this mapping approach is very much that. It's a map that can just help us guide that complexity and recognize and identify what's unique about this community. Because in my opinion, the worst thing we could do is just have a general idea of community benefits and turn it into a tick box exercise. So if we have £800 million and say in a region like rural mid Wales, that might be 1.2 million a year for one of our projects, we just think we're going to do 100 litter picks, we're going to paint some town halls, we're going to fund the sports kits team, job done. Now, all those things might be important to that community, and no doubt they are, but it just seems a bit disingenuous to ask a community to host onshore wind infrastructure and not address some of those structural vulnerabilities and be empathetic to their needs. So that's what we're trying to do now, gather this data. So Anya, if there was an opportunity to share the screen and show the room what one of these maps looks like in person, that would be pretty cool.
I think you can share the screen.
Let's have a look at this. And we're getting some lively debates, or not debates, but good questions in the chat that we'll have to spend some time on later as well.
Fab. Yeah, I'd love to focus on them. Can everyone see what looks like a Kumu map screen? Excellent. So here's one of our systems of interest where we're proposing renewable infrastructure, and that's in the county of Carmarthenshire. So this is in South Wales, South to West Wales, quite a rural community, quite a rural county, a hotbed of Welsh language and culture. And here are the things that are appearing from our analysis right from the start. So they want to see us supporting local businesses, micro enterprises, organizations, supporting the agricultural challenges the region faces, looking at community life and resilience, loneliness and isolation, and the low proportion and depopulation of younger people. So if we just begin to navigate some of this map, let's look at loneliness and isolation as a starter here. In this node, we have a bit of evidence of our understanding of these challenges specific to Carmarthenshire, and we look at its relationship and make connections to other challenges across the system. So when we look at loneliness and isolation in Carmarthenshire, for our engagement with communities and reading local resources, we can see that it's directly connected to community life and resilience. It's directly connected to agriculture. And within each of these edges, there's just a little bit of detail as well, just to show where we got that information from, just to evidence why we made that relationship. But we also got to think about loneliness and isolation in relationship to broadband availability and digital skills and literacy. We've also got to think about it in relation to challenges of living in a rural area and the aging population. And finally, access to transport and transport infrastructure. So this gives us a clear understanding of loneliness and isolation and those things that feed into it, those inherent relationships specific to Carmarthenshire. And one of the great things about Kumu is expanding the focus so we can see those indirect relationships. So when we think about the relationship of loneliness and isolation to community life and resilience, community life and resilience also highlights a relationship to Welsh language and skills. So if the challenge of loneliness and isolation isn't solved in Carmarthenshire or isn't addressed, this would have an impact upon community life and the resilience, and the Welsh language might suffer because of that. So we need to find those organisations who are addressing loneliness and isolation, but in turn might also be addressing Welsh language skills. But we also need to think about across themes as well, maybe around broadband availability, digital literacy, tourism. So a few things about this map I forgot to share at the start. Why is it colour coordinated? It's colour coordinated against each of our themes. So we have cost of living in yellow here, employment, education, and environment and culture in green. And we have recreation and health. And when we identify those place-based challenges, we color coordinate to each of those themes, just so the thematic leads kind of knows the boundary they're dealing with, but they can see the relationship between one of perhaps their challenges and one of the other thematic lead challenges as well. So again, we're looking at the relationship of place-based challenges across themes. So these are one of the maps that are informing our work. When our community benefit fund goes live, we'll have an established charity in each region made up of local community members, and this map will be a useful resource. We can guide them through and understand the relationships in their area, and maybe convene collaboration, do a little bit of a gap analysis. Which areas have we failed to notice? People can see themselves in the system, because of course that's a powerful use of these maps as well. People maybe in the agriculture community bring their own mental models, but maybe they need to look at their relationship to biodiversity. Maybe they need to look at their relationship to local tourism. And again, culture and the Welsh language. So it helps people to see themselves in the system and their direct and indirect relationships to other areas. So hopefully these tools should be useful when the Community Benefit Fund goes live.
Thanks so much, James. And it's really impressive to see how you, first of all, put all of this into practice, but then, combine this contrast between, empathy-driven and community closeness to a very, holistic and data-driven approach at the same time. I'd like to bring Sanjay's question forward here. We've all discussed NIMBY, not in my backyard kind of syndrome. How does these things kind of help you overcome that? And, what are those leverage points to help reduce the not in my backyard?
It's a great question. It's a great question, Sanjay, and thank you for that. I think just to begin with this question, I think the term NIMBY is a little unfair, actually, because I think we're asking communities to host infrastructure, and most people in communities have a sense of place attachment. Their community is symbolic to them in different ways. And I think that's what we've got to see. I don't want to call it a barrier, but it's certainly that is the barrier for people hosting this infrastructure, is the sense of place attachment. Now, is this infrastructure the right thing to do? It's certainly, in the face of the climate crisis and the net zero targets, it's something we can mobilize quickly. It's the most cost-effective thing we can do at this point, certainly in Wales, has been identified by the Welsh government, also of independent bodies. So I think we need to get that micro and macro relationship correct. We need to begin to steward communities to see that, yes, we are addressing a macro issue here, and it's really important. And typically people do see that. They say, yes, this is the right thing to do. Just as you say, I don't want to see it, not in my backyard. But I think if we can understand and empathize with people's place attachment, what's symbolic to them, maybe we can work and collaborate with them to use this community benefit fund to augment that sense of place attachment. So I think, yeah, it just requires a few years of being empathetic and navigating conversations and engagements, again, with empathy. Has there been a big...
Have you seen a strong opposition kind of transition into acceptance through these approaches?
Not directly yet. No. There is a voice of opposition, and people do organize themselves to oppose these projects. And you know, they have some valid concerns that we certainly need to address in the planning process. Whether or not we can begin to see a bit of a change in those perspectives remains to be seen. There has been some interesting studies. A friend of mine studied a PhD at the University of Cardiff and said the acceptance of onshore wind during the lifespan of the project, even into decommissioning, is more positive with those communities where there is a relationship with the developer. The developer just doesn't disappear, but actually begins to collaborate and work with communities. So that's one way I think we can begin to maybe turn some of that negativity, or at least not do a 180 in that negativity, but begin to nurture maybe some positive conversations into the future. Yeah.
Oh, that's nice to hear. It's not just the work up until development, but a lot of that maybe change of mind happens once things are a bit more up and running. You start seeing those benefits. I don't know if it's -30 or -40 degrees Celsius. I know you have it quite windy over there, right? What's your coldest temperatures you reach during winter, you think?
In Wales,
Yeah.
crikey. Do you know what? You're right in saying it's windy. There's no doubt about that. It's certainly rainy. I think in North Wales, I think it got down to about -7, I think. South Wales, no more than -3, I think. So certainly nothing in comparison to Mongolia. But we get a heck of a lot of rain. So that keeps us in our coats for sure.
For anyone with a question who doesn't feel like typing, please just raise your hand and we get involved in the conversation. But while you're thinking about that, I wanted to touch upon one of the things you briefly mentioned, and we've talked about it in the hub before. You know, it's this difference between kind of how the proximity to these developments and how you kind of get reimbursed, or whatever you want to call it. From my experience, I've seen the directly concerned landowners get a lot of benefits, and for example, the municipality does get a lot of community benefits, which benefit those living in the more central areas, whereas those kind of marginalized household, maybe vacation homes that are living quite close to these wind turbines, they see them, they hear them, they don't own the land around there, so they don't get any pecuniary funds, they don't get the benefits from all of that extra happenings in the city center. What kind of things can these people benefit from?
That's a great question, Simon. And I'll try and address this at different scales, starting with the landowners. And Wales is quite unique in that it's especially in the rural areas, there's a lot of smallholders. And a lot of those landowners are typically people or families who've worked that land for generations, like hundreds, centuries of generations of people have worked that land. They're kind of symbolic of the identity of the area, the Welsh language. And at the minute in Wales, there's been a lot of protests around the no farmers, no food movement. It's a lot of political, it's a very politicized issue at the minute. But I think what they're protesting about is a facet of that is the culture as well. So perhaps through the support of this infrastructure, that can begin to give the smallholders and the farmers a revenue of income. Those in immediate proximity to the energy park. So obviously, we're going to be establishing charities and trusts to manage the fund, determining on spending. We're going to be supporting them with the mapping I've shared. We're designing a social value platform as well, which will have its own grant system and measure the impact of grants that have been awarded. But it is what the charity would determine to do. So if they wanted to, reduce bills, energy bills, they could do so. But we're trying to explore things like in immediate close proximity that does facilitate community resilience. And that could be, say, energy cooperatives. So right now we're looking at how can we support with feasibility studies. Now, feasibility studies can range in price, but some we've seen around about £5,000. How can we look at feasibility study for a hydro project and maybe look at avenues for funding now and or we could match fund or fully fund in the future, and establishing cooperative models. So we have obviously a large team of planners, developers, people with all sorts of skills, and we can leverage those skills for our staff volunteering to support in small energy generation. So those are things we could enable, perhaps through our community benefit fund. And we want to look wider as well to those vulnerable communities, those that perhaps maybe a bit more on the periphery. And we can do that perhaps, well, for a start, looking at the service hubs near some of these rural areas, some of the larger towns, what they provide, and if any of those services relate to those place-based challenges that are appearing in the mapping. One of them could be the struggle of mobility in the local area, because there isn't a bus service or a very limited bus service. So how can we support community transport to get people moving around these communities, which are dispersed over a large area, sparsely populated? How can we look at supporting, say, again, youth involvement, youth leadership and collaboration between different hubs in the areas? So again, it's just using that data-driven approach to understand the need of the immediate communities, to understand that household demographic of those people living in closest proximity, and what we could enable for the community benefit fund. But looking at the structural vulnerabilities of a wider region, because those structural vulnerabilities will affect those immediate communities as well. But with such a large fund of, say, 1.2 million a year over a sparsely populated area, it seems like a great opportunity to think widely, more ambitious, think about legacy, year-to-year funding, not something we can just do short and sharply. It's tangible, we can point at it. But yeah, be ambitious, I think, is the name of the game here.
Thanks, James. I'm having quite a hard time framing Pragya's question. It's the two to the furthest right here in consecutive order. I don't quite know what is in reference to, but maybe you can have a better interpretation of them, James.
What do you mean by innovative solutions? Often incremental changes from the conventional solutions are considered innovative. What is your opinion, experience? I think so I think what's been alluded to here is like
or maybe do you want to explain a bit what your sticker is about?
Yes, so you suggested that based on these studies or the understanding the needs of the community, innovative solutions can be created. And most often we have seen that communities they give their inputs, but their needs are not. Some of their needs are addressed, and the solutions that are considered as innovation, they are actually based on the existing solutions, but there are some just few solutions that are few concerns are just addressed. So I was curious that maybe you, when you are creating in your company these solutions, maybe there is some different approach that you're considering, or maybe you can say from systems thinking what exactly is the innovation here, because conventional systems sometimes fail to address the needs, although they are addressing the objective or solving a problem. But yeah, just out of curiosity.
I think that's a really interesting perspective, Pragya, and I really invite that as a bit of a challenge to us as well, to look at things through that lens. So I can speak to what we're already doing and how we're perceiving this. I think one thing we want to consider ourselves in the community benefits team is to be enablers and conveners, but not necessarily the designers in local communities. Our job is to find what the community are already doing really well themselves. They have the local knowledge. They know the dynamic. They know the vernacular of their community, the way people interact. They don't need people like me coming in who, yeah, I live in a city, in car, like, you know, and like, you know, and they don't need me to tell them what their community looks like and what looks good. I think what we need to do is listen. But what we do have the unique ability of is, because we're meeting with a lot of people and processing a lot of data, as you can see on the mapping, we could convene collaborations. We could look at what's already being done well in one area, the aspirations of another community group who are maybe beginning to get an idea, say community energy, cooperative, off the ground, but they don't know how to do it. We can make that connection and say, okay, you're in Mid Wales, you want to look at sort of a hydro project. We know someone in North Wales doing that really well, and we can convene that relationship. So I think your reflection and challenge is really important, and how we look at innovation and look at that systems innovation lens rather than the parts and what. But I do think our position as enablers and conveners it puts us in a unique opportunity to hopefully do that really well. So yeah, thank you for that.
I must say, I mean, compared to my experience of wind development in Sweden, it's very much just a public consultation. Let's hear all your problems. It's nothing much more comes of it. They might, you know, pay for a swimming pool in the city and hope that the municipality doesn't put in a veto. But the multi-level perspective you're kind of taking here of addressing this from different angles on different levels of concern and value creation kind of creates a more granular approach to it. So it's not necessarily the newness of the solutions that you implement, like bus routes, but it's, I mean, the process that you're doing here is very much different, I think, to a lot of traditional wind power development.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Simon, because obviously the intention is, I suppose, what's tempting for some developers is to do something shiny, tangible, they can point at and say, like, this is what we've done. It's a nice comms piece, but it's hopefully this multi-level perspective could be beneficial, and this, yeah.
Thanks also to Rose for posting a similar initiative in Canada. Yes, Asa, we'll upload the recording on our YouTube channel. so it's available for the long term. And please, I mean, you had an interesting case of in Mongolia. I want to hold on to that somehow. Just send me a message or make a post in the hub so we can kind of reconvene around how to heat homes in extreme temperatures. Quite a novel challenge that I like to think a little bit too much about and hopefully do something as well.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Can you send me the link to this mural? I joined a little late, so probably I couldn't see it.
Okay,
Don't
sorry
see
about that. Anya's posting it now.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, our problem is it's quite challenging because like half the country is spread out all over the country, and there's no grid next anywhere. So they have to burn whatever they find to stay warm in -40. So they can't just like buy an electric heater and then connect to the grid. It's like completely decentralized, like, and they move around. It's nomadic, so it's like herders in the countryside, like kilometers away from urbanization, and they need to stay warm. So yeah.
Right. Fascinating. Thank you for that. I mean,
I'm
gotta
curious
be some
as
solutions. Yeah, Sunny.
sorry, I'm curious as about solar as well, right? If there's a mechanism, I can see the yurt being tied up as the nomads travel, and then they're carrying their wind-powered infrastructure, but potentially also the solar. Is that something
Yeah.
that people already do?
Yeah, some of them have solar panels and they use it, you know, to for mostly like light and turn the TV on. Solar panel and the like a satellite antenna. We just need it to be like to be producing enough energy to heat, to provide heat as well, if possible.
Feels like almost a solution where we need to look backwards rather than forwards. I mean, we've solved this problem in our history. There's probably some nuggets of sustainable solutions that we can kind of translate to this using modern technology in some aspect. Welcome, Ivana. Nice to have you to make it in the final minutes. We're just discussing all of the tons of questions that we had here today.
Yeah, hello everyone. Yeah, sincerely sorry. We were kind of in the middle of agreeing on a very big solar project, so that was a bit very critical. But yeah, now we're here.
Anya, I think we'll turn off the recording here and just have this sort of a outro discussion for whoever has questions or comments that they want to have addressed, so we can take it in a little bit more relaxed format.